Thank you all for joining us today for our forum with the candidates for the Public Service Commission. We have all Republican candidates, Damon Baldone, who's serving as the interim commissioner at this point, Dr. Craig Green, and former state representative Lenar Whitney. These are the candidates for the October 14th election to replace former Commissioner Scott Angelle. We're going to hear from each of the candidates, have them each give a brief introduction, and then we'll take questions. We ask that only members of the press club and the working media ask questions, and just try to keep it in mind that this is a forum, and so try to ask questions that generally everyone can answer. So with that, I guess we can go ahead and get started with Interim Commissioner Baldone.
Thank you for having us here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about the Public Service Commission and my qualifications as a Public Service Commission candidate. Okay, my name is Damon Baldone. I'm born and raised in Houma, Louisiana. I was a state representative from 2001 to 2012. On there, I served in the Ways and Means Committee, Criminal Justice, and then being Vice Chair of Criminal Justice. I also served on DWI Task Force, as well as the Governor's Advisory Commission for Coastal Restoration. My educational background is in 1982. I graduated from Vanderbilt Catholic High School in Houma. 1986, I had a Bachelor of Science degree from Nichols State University. After that, I went on as a grad student to LSU, where I taught a biology lab and worked in a genetics lab. And then I went on and taught in a junior high school for a year, and then went back to Nichols as a grad student and taught remedial math, and then decided to go to law school. I graduated in 1992 from Southern University Law School, where I've been practicing for the last 25 years as having my own firm. Besides that, I also have other businesses in real estate, oil and gas, and trucking. So I think I've been interim Public Service Commissioner now for 4 months. I think I have the most qualifications and best suited to continue this job as your Public Service Commissioner, to maintain the lowest utility rates in the country like we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Mr. Green.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Craig Green, Dr. Green. I'm from Maringouin, Louisiana. It's about 30 minutes from here, a very small town. I grew up there. I went to high school in New Roads, and from there I went to LSU. I was on a football team during the Curly Hallman era. Hopefully don't get too much closer to that this year. And from there I went on to LSU Medical School. After that, I did my orthopedic surgery residency in Texas, Texas A&M Health Science Center in Temple, Texas. From there, I went on to the University of Washington in Seattle at Harborview Medical Center and did a trauma fellowship. Came on back here in 2006, began work at the Baton Rouge Orthopedic Clinic. I've been there ever since. I'm in my 12th year of practice there. Also got board certified in sports medicine, and I continue to practice that. I have picked up my MBA from Yale, and I have a wife, 4 children. We're in the process of adoption as well. And I believe passionately in citizen democracy. And I'm running for the Public Service Commission because I think normal people ought to be in government. And I'm not a politician, but I think that normal people ought to represent in this wonderful country we have based in democracy. So I look forward to earning your vote and being your next Public Service Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll go from Ms. Whitney.
Good, thank you very much, Lenar Whitney. I'm the Republican National Committee woman for the state of Louisiana, serving my second term, recently elected. I'm a former state representative from District 53. I served on the Ways and Means Committee and also in the Labor and Industrial Relations Committee. I have the honor of being known as one of, if not the most conservative elected official in the state of Louisiana in living memory. As a member of the RNC, I'm also on the Conservative Steering Committee. So it is my job as a Republican National Committee woman to make sure that the Republican Party stays conservative. So my two candidates, we're all running as Republicans. I just have to make sure that when you say you are a committed conservative Republican, that you can back that with some conservative policy, and that you weren't just recently qualified as a Republican or changed your party association to run as a Republican in this race. So 5 days before qualifying for an event does not really make you a committed conservative Republican. And I also am the only Republican candidate that did not vote for, support, or endorse our current governor, John Bel Edwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I guess first off, just to get things started, the Public Service Commission, even though it may not be the highest profile position, it's known as one where you're an advocate for consumers, but also an advocate for maintaining the interest of what's in the best interest for businesses. So I'm curious to hear from each of you. What do you see as your priority, and what can voters expect from you when you have to make a decision between the consumers and protecting businesses? And we start off with Dr. Green.
Good question. So first and foremost, I'll represent the ratepayer, and the Public Service Commission, what we're going to try to do, this is all about two things: reliability and affordability. We really like our electrons, right? We like our power to come on no matter what, and we like for our rates to be low. And currently, they're the lowest in the country. So no matter what, we have to keep those two principles in mind. How do we keep reliability and affordability? But at the same time, moving forward, how can we bring jobs, keep jobs, and grow economic development? And I think what the Public Service Commission does is it's at the nexus of business and society. And so we have to keep that, as these decisions come before the committee, keep those principles in mind. It's about reliability and affordability. And if there's ever a choice between business and the ratepayer, I'll always choose the ratepayer. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Whitney?
Thank you very much. My campaign slogan is to protect the ratepayers. So I certainly think that we need to have safe, reliable service. And absolutely right, when you go to that light switch, you want to make sure that the light comes on. You want to make sure that we have a low rate. Like right now, Louisiana has the lowest rate for our citizens, and we certainly want to make sure that we maintain that. That is something that the commissioners have been doing for many years, well, at least for the last couple of years, and we want to make sure that that rate is certainly maintained. We need safe, reliable energy. We need to make sure that we reduce the regulatory environment in the state of Louisiana, and we also need to make sure that the Public Service Commission does not become an obstacle to the free market enterprise. There's always a fine balance between, of course, reliability, increasing the rate for the price of the consumers, and also when it comes to the business industry. But certainly it is foremost for protecting the ratepayers of the state of Louisiana.
Thank you. Mr. Vettel?
Thank you. The ultimate job is to protect the ratepayers, but in this case, a lot of times businesses are ratepayers, so the consumers are on the same side of this ballot. The industrial groups, commercial groups, and the ratepayers all pay electric bills, and they're all influenced by our decisions on the Public Service Commission. So the ultimate thing is to maintain the lowest rates in the country, which I'm proud to say this is a category that Louisiana should be extremely proud of being #1 in, is that we have the lowest rates in the country. I intend to maintain that position so that our rates are the lowest for business and for the consumers. I fought 25 years as a consumer rights advocate as an attorney, and I plan to continue that fight on the Public Service Commission.
All right, thank you. At this point, we'll open up to questions from the audience.
You all talk about being the lowest rates in the country. They are among the lowest rates, but we also have some of the highest bills because we use 30% consumers around the country do. What can we do to cut down that?
All right, so the question is, while talking about keeping rates low, also Louisiana consumers tend to use more energy. So what, as a Public Service Commission member, would you do to try to cut back on the amount of energy that's used? And we're going to start this off with Ms. Whitney.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we do have the lowest rates. We do. We have a huge capacity for energy along the rivers in our refineries. So there's lots of energy that is being consumed in the state of Louisiana. Presently, with the Commission Board itself, there's efficiency programs that have just been adopted. They're pilot programs so that we can go to municipalities and also government or businesses to let them know of some efficiencies that would be allowed through grants right now that are currently available through the Public Service Commission. So in education, we also had a forum with the Alliance for Affordable Energy, and there's also efficient ways that we can also educate the residents to make sure that there's some weatherizing and energy efficient things that they can do for their homes, and we could certainly incentivize homeowners and give them some kind of credits for making sure that those homes are weatherized and that they can reduce their energy by practicing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Levin.
Thank you. It is correct that we in Louisiana have some of the highest bills, but we have the lowest rates. And one factor of that is obviously because of our climate. We have extremely hot climate in the summertime, extremely cool, can be extremely cold in the wintertime, so that's why we have high bills. So the best way to combat that is through energy efficiency programs. I'm proud to say, in a Public Service Commissioner, we started an energy efficiency program that will give government agencies the right to get energy efficiency programs into their buildings, as well as a program to get it to the consumer. This is a new program. It's in the second year on the Public Service Commission. Unfortunately, we are one of the lowest in the state, in the United States program. So I'd like to, after this first year, I've seen that it's been a huge success, and we plan on expanding that program because by energy efficiency is how we'll curtail the use, especially in the peak summer months and in the winter months when it's really cold. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Green?
It's a great question, Mark, and I think it revolves around a few key concepts. Energy efficiency is the key, but educating consumers. Scott Hempling had a great email article today that revolved around the difference between opt-in versus opt-out. And if it was a choice between the two, you could actually have a lot more energy efficiency in an opt-out program versus an opt-in program. And I think there are going to be a wave of those type technologies that consumers, if we educate them appropriately, the energy efficiency savings on consumption can be a whole lot more. And then, as Lenar actually mentioned, if we can incentivize consumers on that and educate them, because I think a lot of this is around the human behavior of incentivizing them. So it's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, another question? Did you have one?
The Public Service Commission has to evaluate charts, spreadsheets, proposals, cash flows, so much at one time, and discount another time, or another time. What in their educational background makes them capable of evaluating these proposals without needing additional assistance or relying on special assistance?
Okay, so the question is, the Public Service Commission deals with a lot of data, deep spreadsheets and all of that. What specifically in your background makes you capable of evaluating this type of data on your own? And we're going to start off with Mr. Baldone.
Thank you. You're correct. This position is about looking at a lot of numbers and making sure that the ratepayers are paying the right cost. My background is I have about 18 different companies that I've started, and that's what I do. I look at the financials all the time. I also served three terms in the House of Representatives and looking at the state budget. So I've had a lot of experience looking at numbers. By running my businesses, I have a lot of other help and my managers, and so I'm looking at numbers. That's all I do all day long. Is kind of look at the numbers, make sure they're there, understand, talk to the CPAs, talk to the accountants, to make sure we have the right cash flow, to make sure that we make sure we have the funds available for future. I'm also, I hate to say, like an economics nerd. When I work out every day, I listen to Freakonomics or Planet Money or The Economist. So that's what I love to do as a passion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
I'm a small business owner, orthopedic surgeon, and have my MBA from Yale.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney?
Good, thank you very much. Small business owner. I have a business degree from Nichols. And also as a state representative, I served on the Ways and Means Committee. And on that committee, we deal with taxes, we deal with credits, we deal with revenues, we deal with state in-bondedness, the retirement of bonds. So there was a lot of issues that we dealt with on the state budget, also with capital outlay. So everything, HB1 came to us as a member of the Ways and Means Committee before it went on to the Appropriations Committee. So I have experience for the last 4 years in working on the Ways and Means Committee and the state budget, the $26 billion, now maybe $28 billion state budget. So, and also the commission has a proficient staff. It has its administrative judges, it has administrative lawyers that also help with information that comes across for the commissioners.
Thank you. Another question? Yeah.
In recent, perhaps the past 2 years, and Mark is the expert on this, not me, but it appears that the legislature has become somewhat jealous of the PSC's not only independent funding, but also its decision-making authority. What is the relationship between the PSC and the legislature? Is it troubled now, or is it okay? And if not, how would you fix it?
All right, so the question is about the relationship between the Public Service Commission and the legislature, and basically asking the candidates, what do you view as the relationship as it exists there, and how would you respond in that? So we're going to start off with Mr. Green.
That's a good question. I get along with a lot of the legislators, and I think we have to. I think it's up to us, up to society for us to work together. Now, if there's ever a dispute, I think that's where the legal system comes in, and if the justice system does have to decide if there's a dispute, well, that's why they're there. And so if there is ever in a Venn diagram sort of overlap, then that's probably okay too, because they're deciding. Maybe we have overlap in a decision-making authority, and that'll get parsed out. But I think, all in all, we get along very well, and that's good for society and good for Louisiana. The Public Service Commission in Louisiana is different than a lot of other states because we have separate authorities, separate from the legislature and the governor. But I think it is important that we get along and have conversations along the way.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney.
Well, as a former state representative, certainly there was never any issue that came up before us concerning the Public Service Commission. However, as the Public Service Commission has, their funds have been swept. So we understand that for balancing budgets, that when these fees are collected, there are certain entities that collect fees. The Public Service Commission says that in the collection of these fees, as long as they can collect it and maintain and retain these fees, they have enough to run the commission. However, in the past, what has happened is that the administration has swept these funds. And so that's the big complaint, I think, from the Public Service Commission, that we want to make sure that the fees that are collected in order to run the commission are given to the commission, and that they are off hands and off limit to the legislators. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Baldone?
Yes, I'm not in favor of the legislature sweeping fees from the Public Service Commission because they self-generate fees. Also, there's a recent, I guess, movement by the legislature to try to regulate waste hauling. It's clearly defined by the Louisiana Constitution that's within the parameters of the Public Service Commission. On the Public Service Commissioner, I'm only one of 2 attorneys on the Public Service Commission currently. I authorize our staff to file suit against the legislature and the governor to make sure that our constitutional rights of the Public Service Commission are not infringed. I think we'll be successful in that realm. Again, I don't think there's a big rift between us and the legislature. I'm working with Senator Blade Marsh. We implemented rules to try to help address the situation that they had. So we work with the legislature, but I will always make sure that the legislature does not infringe upon the constitutional rights protected under the Public Service Commissioner.
Thank you. Another question? Bill?
The cable TV industry used to be about competition. Now it's more and more about consolidation. As giant companies like AT&T try to control both the content and the delivery of cable TV services. What role do you see for the PSC in that industry?
Okay, the question is about the cable TV industry and what role do you see as, what role do you think that the Public Service Commission could play in this as there's more and more consolidation among the companies? So for this, we're going to start with Ms. Whitney.
The Public Service Commission basically has ruling over the telecommunications industry, but mostly for landlines. And as we see, as you said, that the market increases and then we have monopolies, whether it's in the utility business or it's in the telecommunications business, we just want to make sure that there is a fair playing field amongst everyone that is participating in that commodity. So that we want to make sure that there's a fair balance recording and the playing field is advantaged for competition in that respect. But for the most part, for the telecommunications, it's our landlines that AT&T and other companies that we would regulate for the Public Service Commission.
Thank you. Mr. Baldone.
Unfortunately, there's little we can do in a Public Service Commission to address that because it's controlled by the FCC. The most complaints I get as a Public Service Commissioner is, unfortunately, about cable and about internet, which we have very, very limited access to help regulate. We do have, again, like AT&T and Cox and Charter. We do deal with them mostly for landlines and other things, so we have limited jurisdiction over them. And I do help all the constituents out when we do get a complaint with those companies. But as far as where this field is going in the next several years, it'll be a lot of internet delivery systems and cable systems. That's how people will get their media, and we don't have a regulation on that, unfortunately. But I wish we could expand that somehow because that's where most consumers have a lot of issues that we need to address.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
I echo the jurisdictional concern about the FCC, and I'll also say that my kids watch most of their television on their iPhone via Netflix, so I think the future is still going to be juggled with regards to cable television. I'll also say that in general I favor letting the market dynamics and competition rule when favorable, and what the Public Service Commission does do is regulate monopolies when they need to be regulated, and if that is the case under our jurisdiction, then we'll certainly take a look at that.
Thank you. All Okay.
You all talked about energy efficiency and the pilot program that's coming out and the use of energy efficiency projects for public entities. Should the PSC directly, the commissioners directly decide where those projects go, where that money goes, or should it be left to a board that's and making recommendations to the PSC?
Okay, so the question is about incentives to encourage energy efficiency and whether that should be up to the PSC to decide or if that should fall on some other entity. So for this one, we will start off with Mr. Green.
I would generally favor when the pilot program is undergoing and completed data, and whether that is a committee or myself, as long as there's sufficient data to show how much savings, who got the savings. And so it doesn't matter to me whether it's a committee or myself, but I just want to make sure there's sufficient data that we can make a strong decision based on solid data. I know in the medical field there's type 1 or type 2 error based on research, and you can make wrong decisions if you don't have if you have an underpowered study based on insufficient data. So I think the important thing is that you have enough and sufficient data to make a decision on.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney.
I think that decision would fall directly under the Public Service Commissioner's jurisdiction. I think that there is no reason why that we represent the state and that we have different programs that are going to be piloted or using these energy efficient programs. So I think that it would be something that we could all discuss. And as you say, we have a proficient staff. We could get all the information, and I think that the Public Service Commission could certainly rule and make that decision.
Thank you. Mr. Baldone.
The Public Service Commission, we're just completing our first year of this pilot program, and all 50 states have some form of this energy efficiency program. So what I intend to do over the next coming months is to examine all the 50 states and see how they do it and what's fair and balanced. It's an excellent program. I think it needs to be expanded. Again, Louisiana has one of the lowest funded programs. I'd like to see it increase funding. And then we'll see what's best practices to make sure, see what other states have done, see what mistakes they've made, and to make sure that the money gets to the people and to the businesses. And that's one thing I found right away is that a lot of these energy efficiency programs, there are these consultants who make a lot of money, but yet the money doesn't actually go to the consumer or to the government. So I want to make sure that we maximize, get the best return of an investment from our energy efficiency program by getting more of that money into actual products that curtail energy.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
I think as I understood the gravamen of the question is whether commissioners should, as individual politicians, hand out these services as favors. Do you favor that kind of political patronage approach to what should be a ministerial function of the PSC?
So the question is a follow-up to the last one, more directly speaking to whether these types of incentives could be seen as sort of a quid pro quo.
Political favor.
Yeah, political favor. So with this, we'll start with Ms. Whitney.
You know, even as a state representative, even when it came to capital outlay, you know, we're all pushing for things within our district. We're all trying to satisfy our constituents. We're all trying to bring home the money. You know, I'm from the South. It was capital outlay for, you know, for our levies, you know. And so I think that this is basically falls under that. I mean, we're all trying to work with consumers to make sure that, you know, the dollars are spent and that we're helping them with these programs. And so I think as a legislator, I think that's what you're called to do. I mean, we have to make some tough decisions. We all have to kind of work together on a panel, just like capital outlay. I don't think it has to be a specialty I think that there would be ways that we could divide and see what types of regions around the state would actually would be benefiting from that. So I think that even with all the municipalities, that wouldn't be a hard way to do with, you know, to spread the wealth and with throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldone.
Under the current system that was set up prior to me getting there, that yes, right now the Public Service Commissioner does have the one that decides where the grants go. That's why I'm willing to look at all 50 states to see what other states do to make sure that it's fair and honest, open system. We are responsible to the voters. You know, right now I have to make some grants actually this week, and you know, the parameters were already given to me, so in the application is already submitted. But we make sure that we have the parameters submitted where it's fair, and we, in my mind, we get the best return on investment with the energy efficiency dollars we receive. But I'm extremely open to looking at other possible ways to disperse these grants.
Thank you. And Mr. Green.
In a break from Louisiana political favors, I do not think they should go as political favors. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question.
At least two of the candidates have promoted themselves as conservatives. What exactly does that mean, and how does that relate to the Public Service Commission?
All right, this question is, candidates have been talking a lot about conservative principles, but what does that actually mean in relation to this specific job? So with this, we're going to start with Ms. Whitney.
There you go. Thank you very much. I am probably the most conservative on this panel as far as a Republican goes. Yes, and I think as a former state representative, I think it's good for you to know that I am a conservative, that when I ran for a state representative, I mean that I am committed to voting against all taxes. On the Ways and Means Committee, I voted against taxes, and just as I fought for the taxpayers for the state of Louisiana, I'm going to fight for the ratepayers. So I think that conservative principle, reducing the size of government, I think all that translates exactly into the Public Service Commissioner's job, because you want efficiencies, you want to make sure that there's responsibilities, you want to make sure that there's open process, and you want to make sure that there's transparency, and all those are principles that have come from the Public Service Commission and also from conservatives. Conservatives don't talk about means testing for utility bills, like one of my my opponents is on this, and they certainly don't switch from being a Democrat all their life to 5 days before running for position become a Republican. That to me is not a conservative.
Mr. Baldone.
I'm glad somebody asked that question. I'm proud to say that I'm conservative. Let me tell you my definition of conservative. It's not using one-time revenues to pay reoccurring expenses. It's not accepting Medicaid money when we should have accepted the Medicaid money. That's not conservative. We could have drawn $348 billion. When Ms. Whitney was in the legislature and the general administration, they refused that money. I am pro-life. I'm pro-life before birth and after birth. Those monies could have been used to save lives. I was not a fan of the general administration and his using smoke and mirrors to hide the budget. I'm glad now we have an administration that's addressing the problems. That's conservative to me, addressing your needs, seeing what your expenses are and making sure you pay for your expenses. That's conservative.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative, and I'm a Republican. And I think what that means on the Public Service Commission is that being conservative, we have to conserve our resources. And what that looks like is keep rates low, and we have to make sure that everything, that the utilities are reliable and affordable, and that keeps money in the ratepayers' pockets and not in the utility companies' pockets or in the government's pockets. And I think that's what being conservative as a commissioner means.
Thank you. We have time for another question.
I know at one time that the railroads and trucking were part of the authority, the areas of authority that the Public Service Commission had. What would be the role of the Public Service Commission these days when more and more of the railroads and trucking are pretty much federally regulated?
So the question is about what each of the candidates see as the role of the PSC these days as there's more federal regulation over railroads and trucking. So for this, we're going to start with Mr. Baldone.
Yes, under the Constitution, we regulate common carriers. So we do still regulate waste haulers, industrial waste haulers, hazardous waste hauling. Again, recently there was, back in front of the Public Service Commission's preview, the legislature tried to implement some legislation that was clearly within the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commissioner. We've since adopted rules to help clarify the issues that were in front of the legislature. So there is still a huge need for us to regulate the hazardous waste industry, especially with the huge growth that we're experiencing in the Lake Charles and in the Baton Rouge area with these new plants. There's a much more need for these trucks to come out, so I feel that we're doing it at the right time to increase the competition in the industry, but with still protecting and maintaining the environment from potentially unscrupulous hazardous waste haulers.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
I think in the early 1900s, the Public Service Commission was the Railroad Commission. And now, railroad is not even under the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission, but waste hauling is. And now, waste hauling, the legislature and the Public Service Commission are in alignment. And I think that's good for the consumer. Market forces are now in play, and it's good for competition, and yet maintaining safety. And so I think it's a good environment right now, and that's good because it's going to be good for everybody because you're going to see lower cost of transporting waste, but equal and higher safety regulations. And I think it's up to us to maintain that environment, and we'll continue to do so moving forward.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney.
I think that the commission has a limited role in the railroads. I think it's basically now for the private crossings. Railroad crossings are under the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission. And then as far as trucking, we want to make sure that we issue licenses and that the need for demand for any new companies are being met, or the services that are provided, the consumers are we have enough capacity to handle that demand. So, and I do think that it's fair competition. I think that, we need to make sure that we have a fair playing field within our trucks. And then, of course, like we said, they come for us for licensing, and then we want to make sure that the consumer demand is being met by the amount of licensed trucks that we have for waste hauling.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to give each of the candidates one last chance to just make their case for this important race. So we'll start with Mr. Green.
My dad once told me, you may remember him, his name was Senator Tom Green. There's no limit to the amount of good a man can do if he doesn't care who gets the credit. I think there are complex issues before our state and upcoming before the Public Service Commission. And my goal as your commissioner will be to gather as much evidence as possible and say a little prayer for wisdom and make a decision, knowing I'm not going to please everyone, but make a decision about what's best for Louisiana and for our state and for our children for when we're not even here anymore. Because you know what I'm really tired of? I'm tired of celebrating the fact that we beat Mississippi for not being 50th in so many categories. Because I just think we can do so much better. And, you know, we don't have to shoot for number one. Let's just start for breaking into the 30s. And how can we get a little bit better every year? And that's why I'm doing this. You might think, why would a guy do this? I just think we can do better. And that's why I'm here, because I believe we can. I know we can. And if you're in our district, if you're in my district, or if you're reading this or watching this, I'd like to ask for your vote, for your prayers. And I think we live in the greatest country in the world, and I absolutely love Louisiana. And that's why I'm running for the Public Service Commission. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney.
Thank you very much. And when I ran for state representative, I was in a time in my life where I thought this was time for me to give back to the state of Louisiana, to actually serve the public in that capacity and to be a citizen legislator. So I took advantage of that opportunity, and then I certainly realized the need for good conservative rulings and good conservative legislation and commitment to the state of Louisiana, and people that would stand strong and be committed and be courageous to make sure that they made the right decisions and for the state of Louisiana and looked forward for the best service for our children and for our grandchildren. And I think that I was one of those legislators who certainly stood in the fire, and actually I have a voting record to prove just how conservative and what I actually stand for as the state of Louisiana. I'd like to be a full-time public service commissioner. I'm going to dedicate myself to this job to be the best public service commissioner I can. I'm not looking at this to run for another position, whether it be governor or it be senator. I really want to maintain and be the best I can as a public service, and then to really serve the constituents and for the state of Louisiana. I'm in the telecommunications industry right now, and I know exactly how demanding it is that you're there to answer that phone and that you have a direct relationship with the constituents in your district, and I plan to do that. I humbly ask you for your vote. I know that I think that I am I have the right qualifications to do this job, and I'm committed to do the absolute best that I can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Baldone.
Thank you. I'm proud to say that I think I have the most qualifications for this job. I'm an attorney for practicing for 25 years. I've been in the state legislature for 3 terms. I'm a small business owner. And most of all, I'm committed to do this job full time. I think I've been doing this job for the last 4 months, and it's easily a 40-hour-a-week plus job. I have the time and ability to do that. I have the most qualifications. I have a 17-year track record. You can see my record that I'm honest, hardworking public servant, and I'm honored to continue to do that for the rest of this term for this Public Service Commission. Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much for joining us today for the forum. Don't forget, the election is October 14th. Early voting is underway. If you can join us next week for our press club luncheon, Dr. Jim Henderson, the president of the University of Louisiana system, will be joining us. Thank you.